except they weren't the truth, which is how you ended up with companies like Enron, who had integrity as one of their core values. My favorite business story ever. Like, thank you, Enron, for that gift to all organizational psychologists. So then about 10 years after that, all of the big consulting companies, Deloitte, McKinsey, these guys started talking to leaders and saying, hey, organizations whose people value the same thing the organization values outperform their peers.
Your business's success depends on relationships. Relationships with customers, relationships with employees, and relationships with stakeholders. What do they all have in common? They're all human. Because no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Welcome to the Human Connection Podcast. I'm your host, Karl Pontau. Each week, I'll bring you stories, insights, and practical advice from experts that you can apply to your growing company and daily life. This week, I'm excited to connect with Nicole Eisdorfer. She is the owner and founder of Truer Words, a small consulting agency focused on diagnosing the gaps between leaders' intentions and the impact on employees. She spends her days helping leaders make sure what they say matches what they do. Culture is so much more than just the words written on the wall. It's the decisions you make, and it's the everyday systems people depend on. Those systems are always teaching your employees what really matters, and she helps make sure they're teaching the lessons you want them to. Congrats on helping leaders make sure what they say matches what they do, and welcome to the Human Connection Podcast.
Thanks, Karl. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, so one of the things that we talked about when we met recently was that the importance of trust in leadership. So why is trust your organization's most strategic asset?
You know, I feel really lucky to be having this conversation in the environment we're in today, because trust is all over the news. Every single one of these big issues that you're seeing in people, anything, right? Business, consumer products, it's all comes down to trust. We are in an environment where people don't even know what's real anymore. And so when you can connect and you can build that credibility with your customers, with your employees, with your vendors, with all of your partners, then you have a shortcut. You don't have to spend every single interaction proving yourself. It's founded in trust.
Yeah, and I think it's something that so much of what companies have been doing the last 20 years to try and get like the bottom line looking better, or get the numbers look good, or like to just grow, has been at the expense of long-term trust and relationships. And now that's coming back to bite a lot of companies in the butt in a big way, because now the methods they use to like FOMO tactics and like all the marketing that was really about like getting people to buy in quick and then not really, and there's all these, like, this doesn't build the trust. And so now when that trust is finally eroded to the point where people aren't responding to those kind of quick purchasing, like rushed the transaction sort of stuff anymore, now they're kind of stuck with like, well, what do we do? Because we can't get the same results we needed. And the stuff like AI is just making it harder for people to trust any sort of content, because like I say, we can't tell what's real, what's AI generated, what's fake. And so that this new challenge leaves a lot of companies and their leadership ill-equipped to handle it. So I imagine that's something you come in and help people with.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, there, believe it or not, there are actually companies out there who are truly mission and vision and values driven. And it's really easy to borrow systems and to borrow processes and to borrow policies from your competitors, from whatever is on, you know, the, on the SHRM website of templates, and to not really think about what that process or that policy does and how it does or doesn't match your values. And so you end up with this over time sliding away from your values, and not intentionally, but when your things that your employees live every single day don't match the things you're saying. Your employees are smart. You hired them to be smart. They can see the difference between those things, and they stop trusting your words.
And I imagine that also leads to increased turnover, because when people realize what their experience isn't matching what they were sold during the hiring process, then they're going to leave, and that turnover is also super expensive for companies and leads to a lot of unnecessary expenses with rehiring or retraining, all that stuff, because you have this revolving door of people that get sold on the brand of a company. They get there and realize this isn't the reality, and they're like, well, I'm out of here.
Yeah, well, I think during normal times that's the case. Right now, because the job market is so shaky, people are staying put even when they're not happy. And so then you see all of that. We love to throw trendy words at it: quiet quitting, quiet cracking, quiet whatever. My friend Ryan calls it quiet drowning. And it's so people stay put, but they don't put in all of that extra effort that they would normally put into a job that they care about and that they feel cares about them. And so it's costing employers, but it's costing them in really sneaky, hard to measure ways right now.
Yeah, there's that quiet quitting, or that basically putting in the bare minimum just to not get fired, to keep earning the paycheck, but not to provide that exceptional like client experience, or to really deliver really innovative ideas that could be beneficial for the company long term. They're just kind of quarter or half-assing it, and the company's deliverables and the clients probably will be leaving then, because again, there's so many options for other service providers and stuff out there that they're not happy with what they're getting, then they'll go somewhere else. And it's those employees that need to be delivering that experience for the clients. And so if you don't have the right, if your employees aren't happy, then that just filters down to unhappy clients, and that leads to unhappy balance sheets, because you're no longer having the client base that you were expecting.
Yeah, but it takes a minute for that trickle down to happen, right? So it's harder to tie what you did today, the decision you made about a return to office, or the decision you made about a PTO policy, to your customer outcomes. We think in quarters in our system, right? And so you look at what happened at the end of this quarter and you're like, oh, it must have been fine. But 3 quarters later, all of a sudden you're seeing customer satisfaction score slip. And then a year later, you're seeing customer attrition. And it's really hard to look backwards a year and say, oh, we did this to ourselves. And so it just sort of slides under the radar. And, what we'll do is we'll throw training at it. We'll say, oh, well, our people aren't delivering excellent customer service, so we're going to train them in customer service. But your people aren't delivering excellent customer service because you're not incentivizing them to do so. Forget about pay. Why should they want to give more of themselves than they're getting from you? If they think they're going to be laid off tomorrow and you're going to go brag to your shareholders about it, why? What human being would ever say, oh yeah, sign me up for that?
Yeah. So what is, with all this, obviously the rampant problem with businesses, how do you help companies that want to fix this to actually align what they say they care about with what they actually are doing, so that they don't have all these issues?
So I look at what they say they value. I mean, obviously there are values that I am aligned with more than others, but I don't really care what your company's values are. Value what you want to value. Just tell the truth about it. And so say you value individual development amongst your employees. And so what you want that to look like is that you want employees to start out at the bottom and be able to work their way up within your company. So what I would start by looking at would be, what are your internal mobility structures? How do you incentivize internal mobility? How do you make it possible for people to move around within your company? And how do you make it harder? And just balance out, like, what is supporting what you say you value and what is working against it. And again, at the end of the day, I don't really care if you value stealing babies' candy. I'm going to look at your processes and say, okay, well, this one helps you steal babies' candies and this one gets in your way. I mean, I doubt that the people who steal babies' candies want to work with me. They're not keen on telling the truth.
Yeah, but that'd be very weird under like the about section of a company to see, like, we have a huge stockpile of babies' candy that we've been stealing over the years, and it's like,
if Mr. Burns started a company in modern day.
I guess so. But yeah, and so why do you think it's so many companies have this problem of not being able to walk what they talk?
Well, a lot of companies, okay, now we're going to do a history lesson. So around 20 years ago, Jim Collins released Good to Great, and it's a great book. the primary lesson that a lot of leaders took out of it was that organizations who are mission driven outperform their peers. And they said, great, fantastic. So what we're going to do is we're going to form a committee, and they're going to write mission and vision and value statements, and we're going to put them on every mouse pad in the building. Awesome. Except they weren't the truth, which is how you ended up with companies like Enron, who had integrity as one of their core values. My favorite business story ever. Like, thank you, Enron, for that gift to all organizational psychologists. So then about 10 years after that, all of the big consulting companies, Deloitte, McKinsey, these guys started talking to leaders and saying, hey, organizations whose people value the same thing the organization values outperform their peers. And so now you started seeing this whole slew of different assessments being created to assess the values of the people you're hiring and see if they match the values of your organization. But again, no one paused and said, hey, do we actually value this? And so now you're hiring people who value what you say you value, but you don't value that. And quite often your processes work in opposition to it because you never designed them to match it in the first place, because they weren't real values. So if you say that you value fun, you had better have something to back that up, because people are going to come to your workplace expecting fun. And the thing where this got really toxic, and the reason I'm so invested in it and the reason I ended up doing it, is because I studied burnout for my dissertation. And I studied burnout in physicians, and physicians are fascinating. They assess at almost double the level of resilience as the general population. And yet they're still burning out faster than the general population. And that is counterintuitive. Our number one answer for burnout is, oh, let's just train people to be more resilient. But obviously it didn't work for physicians. So why? Physicians, before any of the rest of us started living in mission, vision, values world, physicians have always lived there. And so have nurses and all of the other healthcare providers. So when they were hired to take care of people, and they were trained to take care of people, and they were put in systems that don't let them take care of people, it broke something in them. And I actually talked about this yesterday. When you are at work, there's a job demands resources model that predicts burnout. And it basically says if your demands are higher than your resources over time, then you get burnout. When you have demands at work and you don't have enough resources at work to handle them, you start to pull in personal resources, personal motivation. You lean on your family relationships. Sometimes you have some negative coping skills, alcoholism, drug abuse, all of these things. So you pile on personal resources. Well, if one of the job demands is something that undermines one of your personal resources, so if you have a values mismatch, if the reason you come to work is being worked against, it undermines your ability to pull in those personal resources. So you actually burn out faster, and you burn out in a way that resists intervention.
Wow. First of all, is like I can see why the physicians burn out with how like screwed up our healthcare systems and how much the system doesn't like want to help people, and like that mismatch is like a dichotomy, practically like other opposite end of the spectrum in a lot of cases. So it's that makes a lot of sense. And so for organizations that like a leader that realizes, oh, we actually have this, we're not living the values we claim. What's the process like for actually righting that ship and living the values that they claim on all those mouse pads, instead of like avoiding like the kind of catastrophic issues that some like an Enron would experience, where everything kind of like blows up in their face when the truth is revealed?
Well, this is one of the reasons that I have an incredibly small clientele base, because there are only a certain percentage of leaders in the world who are willing to do this work, who actually truly believe their mission, vision, and values. And so it requires absolute buy-in from the top, from leaders. and support and ownership of what went wrong in the past and ownership of where things slid and a lot of transparency. So for example, let's go back to our baby candy stealing company, because no one's going to think I'm talking about Microsoft if I use that example. So if I am prioritizing stealing candy from babies, and all of the people who I have brought in care about stealing candy from babies because they're all just evil supervillains in training. So then I have this process that is actually sneakily giving candy back to some babies. So I would, as a leader, have to say, okay, we have found this thing that is the opposite of what we say we're doing. Patagonia does this, by the way. They're a fantastic example. We found this thing that does the opposite of what we say we value. Here's how we're planning to fix it. Here's how we'll know we're succeeding. Here's what we want you to tell us. These are the red flags that we're not succeeding, that we want you to escalate up. And then your first person who's brave enough to be a hand-raising hero and say, hey, this isn't right, you celebrate the living daylights out of them, because you need to build stories in your organization of the positive things that happens to the person who's willing to say, wait a second, these things don't match. Because most of our organizations do not have those positive stories. We have 1,000,007 negative stories of Jerry from accounting who got fired because he pointed out that his boss was skimming the books, and the boss is still there. Or, his boss was giving candy back to babies.
Yeah. Yeah. Please keep your metaphors consistent, or your examples
I know.
consistent. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, that you need to have that positive reinforcement of the calling out when things don't work. And I think it's something that, I see why you have that very narrow list of clients, because I think most leaders just they're not trained for this. Their mindset's not in the right space, which is tragic.
Well, and there's this focus on short-term outcomes, right? And we talked at the beginning about how people data is a very lagging indicator. And so it's very hard to justify the expense in, Q1 of this year, when you may or may not see the outcome of that until Q4 of next year. And that's difficult for leaders. And that's very much the opposite of the focus that we've seen in companies in modern history. The other thing that I think is really important to point out for me specifically is that I very rarely will work with an organization to do the correction step. I am a diagnostician. I think I told you this the other day. My metaphor, it's not candies and babies, but my metaphor is a medical metaphor. So if I'm a physician, I'm a radiologist. I can tell you you have lung cancer. I can tell you you have pneumonia. I am going to send you to a different doctor to fix that, because I don't want to do it. And frankly, I don't trust most leaders to actually engage in the work that's required. So it's a not very hopeful statement, but it's also a very realistic. This is hard work, and you have to do it one piece at a time, and you have to be committed to it for the long haul.
And the thing that I think is that people forget is that the results you get from putting in this hard work over the long haul and then playing that longer game is going to drastically outperform any of the short-term get quick results stuff that they're like, this rat race they're in with all the other companies that are doing the same sort of sleazy, underhanded stuff. If they just break out of the cycle and zig when others zag and go play this longer game again, they get this amazing result, way more. But it's like getting them to see that and being willing to put the effort in is such an uphill battle, but I think that there's my hope is that there'll be eventually there'll be some breaking point where just you can't keep doing the short-term stuff. It just won't work anymore, and they'll have to, but it's a matter of sticking it out until that finally breaks down. And then when there's suddenly the giant aha moment from enough people, then they'll see that switch. But it's getting to that point. The whole darkest before the dawn thing is never fun.
Well, and you're seeing some of the signs of that now, right? I don't know if you read The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek. It's one of my favorite books. And it's funny, I had all these ideas and I just listened to it on a road trip to the Grand Canyon this summer. And it plays into this exact idea. If leaders are focused on the short term, they are playing a different game than leaders who are focused on the long term. For me, I don't know that I could believe in all of this if I hadn't lived it myself. I told you about this. I worked in the Container Store in the mid 2000s before they went public. And I lived in a company in a sector that everyone hates. No one is like, my favorite job ever was in retail. And yet here I am saying that. And seeing a company that embeds their values and their principles into every single thing they do, every single day, every decision you make, the way you talk about your decisions, the way you're evaluated, like literally everything you do every day is transformative, because if they can get it right in retail, they can get it right anywhere. And if you want to see what happens when you switch from that long-term focus to the short-term, look at what happened to them since they went public, because it's gone. They used to invest huge numbers of hours of training into their employees, not anymore. And they're trying to switch it back. They just went back private. It's going to take a while. They're going to be doing this work. So that is a company to keep an eye on what happens.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for connecting with me today, Nicole. If you enjoyed this episode of the Human Connection podcast, please like, leave a review, and share it. If you'd like to connect with myself or Nicole, check out the links in the show notes. And remember, no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Happy connecting.
Thank you.